Welcome back to Strummin' with Yes. Alright, so we're on to another Yes album. As I said before, I'm working on these in the direction that I discovered them. I hope this makes it at least a little bit more interesting to discuss these albums. So, 90125 introduced me to the world of Yes, and progressive rock as a whole. And then we got Fragile. And then in between there's a classic Yes album, like the best of, which I haven't reviewed and probably won't. And then I got to the Yes album, which I absolutely just loved. I really love that album. So now it's time. It is time to start venturing into the heavier, deeper version of Yes. So Rick Wakeman, of course, had already done Fragile. So this is the Close to the Edge, which by many is considered to be the pinnacle of Yes's ambitions. Maybe. Fragile and Close to the Edge really have what is I think is the definitive Yes lineup. And I'm not even going to start picking on any other lineups because I think they've all contributed something. And they've all flavored the band in a way that most bands don't get this opportunity. A lot of times when bands have to switch out players, it's kind of the not as good person coming in or not as interesting. Yes has managed to kind of avoid that. A lot, actually. So, Close to the Edge. When I bought this album, I'd already heard And You and I because of the classic Yes album. And I love that song. Right there. It's playing it. Yeah, I always play the easy parts, by the way. Just for the record, when you watch these videos, I only play the easy parts. But I just loved it. It was an acoustic piece. It had the Mellotron. I think that's about when I discovered the existence of the Mellotron. I'd heard it before in music, but never knew what it was. I always thought the Mellotron was kind of cool. But it's become something that the progressive rock gotta have a Mellotron, right? And it was long, but it was also really divided into little bits and parts. So I really liked In You and I still do. Although it's one of those songs I've heard too many times now. So, when I got this album, I have to admit, I didn't particularly love it. It's weird, and I think I'm probably not the only progressive rock fan that has this. Some of this music in progressive rock you don't love, and yet you have such a respect for what they've accomplished. I don't know if that makes any sense whatsoever. Let me know. And Yes, Close to the Edge really kind of fell into that. The Close to the Edge itself just seemed like a bunch of racket to me when I first heard it. Now, I stuck with it, and I actually do love this song. But if you look at the... it is interesting that Eddie Offord is pictured with the band here in the back. And I think he's like the fifth Beatle of Yes. There's something very distinct about Eddie Offord's production on Yes albums. And that is, I think he really kept it all together. And also, he probably helped kind of keep the egos in check. Or at least, maybe as producer, he was able to decide this is what sounds best for the song, not for Rick, Steve, Chris's ego, and John. All of them. Except maybe Bill Bruford. He doesn't seem quite as full of himself. But I could be wrong. Never met the man. So, Close to the Edge is broken up into 4 parts. It starts off with kind of the sound effects of water and cascading and some keyboard sounds, and then it explodes. And in retrospect, this piece is great. It's very dynamic. It's just huge. It goes through many different moods. Everybody's really putting in 100% on this song. but it's also very disjointed. In interviews I read with Eddie Offord and others, that Eddie was literally picking pieces of tape up off the floor and editing and splicing them together to create this song. And for that, I think he deserves a lot of credit. The song could have gone in an incredibly bad direction, and it doesn't. I still enjoy Close to the Edge, but it does sound a bit stitched together. There's very kind of cold feeling about the song. Unlike And You and I, which, as I already said before, I really enjoy. This is Yes playing. It's a predominantly acoustic song. Although, like, again, there's Mellotron there. There's Steve Howe with his pedal steel guitar. And it gets kind of big. It reminds me of, I know people are going to slap me for this, it sounds a bit like a Pink Floyd song overall. Now, John Anderson's voice, of course, is totally different than Roger Waters, David Gilmour, or Richard Wright. And it's in a different register. So in that aspect, no. But when you get to the Eclipse part, the big sound, it actually has very much a Pink Floyd sound to it. These musicians are a little better than Pink Floyd, but I love Pink Floyd. Don't misquote me. But And You and I is really, and it just really has some beautiful passages. And Steve Howe does some great. The acoustic in the beginning, which I think is a 12-string on the album, is great. And then the preacher and the teacher part, he does some really nice finger picking. And Steve's really at his prime, kind of his prime at this point. And it was a good time for him to join Yes. Eventually, when I get into the further along, I think Steve has really lost it. Sorry. He has almost no tone in his guitar anymore. So, you know, he's really powerful player at this point. Finally, get to Siberian Khatru, a song that actually reminds me of something that would have been on the Yes album, except this is kind of, you know, they cranked it up to 11. Great vocals, harmonies by the band, and that's one thing that's I always liked about Yes albums is John Anderson's voice is incredibly distinct, and I know some people just don't like it. It's alto tenor, I think. It's way up there. So, but then you have Steve Howe, who doesn't have a very good voice, and yet generally sounds really good as a background singer, and Chris Squire, who has an okay voice. If you listen to enough Yes, and if you listen to solo albums, you know what his voice sounds like. It's not the kind of voice that sells records, but he's a very good singer and incredibly good background vocal singer. So they all bring this texture to it, and that's shown a lot in Siberian Khatru, especially some of the little breaks in the vocals. It's really a riff-oriented song, which is something you don't get a lot in Yes. It has a couple riffs that play through repeatedly. It's about 10 minutes long, and it's a great song. It really is, and I like the old days when they played it faster. Nowadays, they've gotten older. I don't expect them to be at their prime, but now they almost seem to play it. It's almost sluggish. And there's just a difference between, you know, slowing down here and being sluggish. But the original is an awesome song. Okay, so we get into the extra tracks. America, single version. I love the long version, so I don't see the reason for a single version except to sell 45s. So it's a curio. Total Mass Retain, the short version, the single version from Close to the Edge. Really, somebody took an almost 20-minute song and made a single version. That said, the editing isn't too bad on it, but it's pointless. But it's for novelty. Yeah, you gotta check it out. And You and I, this is a alternative version, and it's a little bit different. Yeah, it's worth listening to. It is interesting to listen to how a song evolved into what we just accept as the song, and there's just little tweaks in there. Some of John Anderson's vocal choices are strange in this version. And then Siberia, which is a studio run-through of Siberian Khatru. Kind of a cool song to listen to. It sounds a little more like a jam in this. And, yeah, it's worth checking out. Bonus tracks, again, I find them interesting. But you're really looking for this album. Is it the greatest Yes album? I don't think so. I'm sorry. I know people are going to complain about that. It's a great Yes album, and it shows that level shows a level of ambition by the band that was incredible, and it really was the next logical step after Fragile. So it is still a good album, possibly a great album. It's worth checking out, and it's going to require more than a single listening to catch on to it. and that's the thing, is Yes's music, King Crimson, Genesis, all of these bands, they were making music that required you to really sit down and listen to it, pay attention. I don't think that's a bad thing. Now, I love a 3-minute pop song. I still listen to pop music today, and there's a place for that. There's a place for both. I always find people a little I always find it a little odd that people can't, like, for instance, say enjoy Star Wars and Star Trek. Heaven forbid you bring 2001 into the mix. I like Star Trek. The movies, some of them are good, some of them are bad. I like Star Wars. Some of them are great, some of them are god-awful. But the point is, I can like them both, right? So I can love Yes, and I can love a 20-minute long song and still enjoy a good pop song. So anyways, this one's a little bit of a shorter review, thank goodness. Thank you for listening, and I hope you come back and share your thoughts. Thank you.